Economic opportunity is incredibly important to belonging. When people have economic opportunity, that's when communities thrive. They're safer. When folks can stabilize, when they can exchange goods and services, when they can make money, when they can build wealth, and they can take care of themselves and their families and each other. Historically, there were so many things that were unavailable to us. Basic things that for most folks as Americans, we take for granted, like life insurance policies or protections for your businesses. Those are things that were not afforded to us. So if you owned something, you owned a business, you had the ability to be able to take care of yourself and others. If something happened, you were able to extend that protection to your community. You create space. If you own a space, you can also create space.
Economy and community are impossible to separate. Money decides where we live, who we live near, and what kind of future we can imagine for ourselves. And in America, race has always been tied to opportunity, not as a chapter in our history, but as a current still shaping it. More than 60 years after the Civil Rights Movement, the median wealth of white families in the U.S. is still nearly 6 times that of black families. Home ownership, one of the most reliable paths to generational stability, remains lower for black Americans today than it was in 1968, the year the Fair Housing Act was signed. In places that have been historically underinvested, opportunity feels distant, often exported, along with the people who find it. As cities experience strong economic growth, the problem inverts. Prosperity itself becomes a force of displacement. In this episode, we're introduced to 2 black communities, 2 cities, 2 economies, both wrestling with the same truth. When opportunity isn't shared, community can't last. Coming up, I talk with Majora Carter, whose work in the South Bronx challenges the assumption that success means leaving home, and ask what it takes to build communities where people want to stay and can. But first, Abra Allen explores San Francisco's Black Wall Street, an organization working to create wealth and ownership in a city that often prices out the very people who built it. My name is Chip. Welcome to the Sidewalk Ballet.
Earlier this year, through my work with the Mid-Market Foundation here in San Francisco, I met Tanish Hollins, Gwen Brown, and Kenya Bodie Austin, the 3 co-founders of SF Black Wall Street. The group of us co-presented a Juneteenth event through Market Street Arts, an initiative to revitalize, or as I prefer to say, reimagine the mid-market neighborhood through arts, culture, and creative business. The event brought together Black Bay Area artists in celebration and inspired thousands of us to dance together, including a samba line with our mayor, to sing and party in the heart of San Francisco. It was a great night and an important one.
Juneteenth events is really a part of the SF Black Wall Street origin story. It's the whole reason why our organization and our foundation exists.
That's Tanish Hollins, co-founder of SF Black Wall Street.
Juneteenth has been in existence for over 70 years. And, when our organization started during the pandemic, not only was the city shut down, but the visibility of Black San Francisco was almost non-existent. And that was, before the pandemic, when it came to cultural events, when it came to the population of Black San Franciscans, the number of businesses owned by Black folks in San Francisco, we had seen a decline over the years. And so it was really important to us and to our community to bring that visibility back, but also really important to San Francisco at this time when we're talking about economic recovery, when we're talking about bringing the city back, bringing the arts back, bringing the economy back. We wanted to make sure that Black San Francisco was represented in that our community was part of that. And so that event was really significant, and that work is really important to us.
There was a time when San Francisco's Black community was more visible. The Fillmore District was called the Harlem of the West, a place alive with music, fashion, and pride. After World War II, thousands of Black families came to the city, drawn by the promise of jobs in the shipyards and the Navy, and by a rare sense of possibility. Clubs lined the streets, Jimbo's Pop City, the Blue Mirror, Club Alabama, where Billie Holiday, Miles Davis, and John Coltrane all played. It wasn't just a nightlife, it was a neighborhood life. Churches, barbershops, record stores, the full ecosystem of a thriving Black community. But by the early 1970s, that neighborhood began to disappear. Just like in so many other cities, urban renewal projects promised modernization, wider streets, new housing, fresh investment. What they delivered was demolition. Entire blocks were razed, homes and businesses were seized, and families were displaced. Between the 1970s and today, San Francisco's Black population fell by over half, from about 13% of the city to less than 5%, according to the latest census data. In the Fillmore, it's closer to 3%. Some left seeking opportunity elsewhere, to Oakland, Vallejo, or the East Bay suburbs. Others were simply priced out, pushed out, or worn down by a system that made staying nearly impossible. But it's more than just people that have left. Black businesses and Black culture have diminished as well. Co-founder Gwen Brown says it goes deeper.
In that absence of the Black community, I think it's shown all through San Francisco. The cultural experiences of people have changed. Just to kind of put it plain, San Francisco has lost a bit of its soul. This welcoming spirit that I think is reminiscent of Black culture. And I think when you lose the Black community, you lose that sense of belonging, especially people who didn't necessarily fit in where they were from. You lose that sense of welcoming. You lose that sense of you have a place here. But I think over the years, people have felt less and less welcomed in San Francisco. And I attribute that to the lack of the Black presence. That could be far-fetched, but for me, that's what I see. But I think we lost our soul, man. San Francisco lost its soul.
The loss that Gwen talks about is not a new phenomenon, and it's not unique to San Francisco. When a city prices out the very people who are a part of making that city, it is an injustice that is violating and can often seem hopeless. But along with their co-founder, Kenya Bodie Austin, Tanish and Gwen turned grief to hope and ultimately to action. With a determination to rebuild what was taken, to restore visibility and ownership to San Francisco's Black community, SF Black Wall Street was born. Their mission isn't nostalgia. It's about reclaiming, growing, and sustaining power, economic, cultural, and spatial. They're working to create the conditions where Black families and Black businesses can not only return, but thrive.
There are 3 core tenets to Black Wall Street's mission, and that is increasing Black homeownership, increasing Black business, and also creating more Black space. We see all those things as extremely important to reversing or addressing the outmigration of the Black community in San Francisco. We have to create ecosystems, and those three tenets are vital.
You were talking about creating space, and I think that's so important in most communities to give people also a place to gather. I know that you opened a space, the 1921 Lounge in the Bayview. There was probably some really clear thought around why you set that as a goal to open that space and why it was so important to the Black community. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that from you.
Well, opening that space was incredibly important for a number of reasons. One, the 1921 Lounge, in addition to physically being a space that historically been Black space in this community for over 40 years, is incredibly important in a city and in a community where the Black population continues to decline. And where holding space is important. But in addition to that, this is a social enterprise, and that's really thanks to Gwen's genius, that this business will generate revenue to fund programming and services for our nonprofit. And there are many other amazing models, that we've been able to look at and learn from. You look at Homeboy Industries and Father Greg Boyle down in LA. There are many other examples across the country that we've been able to look at and study different blueprints. And we hope to be able to build our own model that we can show to our community and say, this is an opportunity for you. to take a turnkey business and utilize this capital to be able to build out your organization, build out your business. And that is critical right now, that we be able to maintain ownership of things, that we have models that are scalable, that we are able to build capital for our organizations, that we also treat our nonprofits as businesses because they are businesses. And I think a lot of times in our community, folks only focus on the service end of it and not think about the business end of managing a nonprofit. But that's incredibly important to us because we see the pitfalls of having to rely on just city grants and city funding or, just the funding that's available. We're in a, kind of an economic crisis right now. There are a lot of priorities. We know that there's dollars in our community. We know that we spend dollars with each other. And so if we create a business model where we know we can be of service to our community and spend money with each other, then we can go ahead and continue being of service to our community.
I'd also like to add that 1921 was also an opportunity for us to really create a third space. A third space with some intentionality on really gathering. And when you own your space, then you get to dictate the tone, the atmosphere, the ambiance, the conversation.
The 1921 Lounge opened in February of 2025 and served as an event space, a co-working space, an entrepreneurial incubator, in short, a physical manifestation of hope and rebuilding. Just less than 4 months after the ribbon was cut on the space, it closed due to a fire started in a neighboring property. Today, the symbol of rebuilding is waiting to be rebuilt, but hope has not been shelved.
The hope for me is just intentional partnership, and folks seeing the value in Black San Francisco. Gigi said something really important earlier when she said that it feels like San Francisco is losing its soul. And, people recognizing that the cultural diversity that folks reference when they talk about San Francisco, Black San Francisco, Black San Franciscans are a huge part of that. The history, the footprint of it. And when it's recognized and when it's uplifted, it just makes the city so much better. So whenever there's new restaurants opening and events happening and I see some familiar faces, it inspires me. It gives me hope. When I see locals, people, natives from the city, it makes me hopeful. It inspires me that there are still things happening. When I see, projects that have been in conversation for years, finally moving forward, it inspires me. So I do think that there's still plenty to be excited about. There's still plenty of opportunity, but there's still work to do.
When people are talking about SF Black Wall Street, say in 5 years, 10 years, what are they saying?
I think we all kind of want to leave our little personal footprint. For me, I want people to say when they talk about Black Wall Street that we created socially responsible models that liberated our community by giving us a different way to generate revenue in a way that they were sustainable and they were able to be passed on to someone else. I hope we get to really have the opportunity to really share a blueprint for that so that communities all over the United States can use them to create these nonprofits with this business model. This is how you fund the freedom and the liberation for our communities in a way that's responsible and benefits everyone, right? So that's a big thing, but I know it's possible, and I hope that we get that. I hope that we get to do that.
Aber's full conversation with SF Black Wall Street is available at sidewalkballet.com. After the break, I talk with Majora Carter.
The Sidewalk Ballet is presented by Big Creative Consulting, helping you to strengthen community through culture and place. Big Creative Consulting works with organizations on strategic planning, transition and change management, community engagement, and event strategy and implementation. Join the Big Creative conversation by going to bigcreativeconsulting.com. Additional support for the Sidewalk Ballet comes from This Must Be the Place, a bi-monthly newsletter sharing opportunities for placemaking professionals. Opportunities can include, but aren't limited to, jobs, internships, fellowships, calls for art and publication, and grants. The hope is that it helps everyone from students to emerging and mid-career professionals, as well as experienced leaders, to connect with others, strengthen relationships, and further legitimize the field of placemaking. To subscribe, visit thismustbe.org.
So I have a problem. It's actually become a minor point of contention between me and Abra. You see, I can't even come close to an independent bookstore without needing to go in, and chances are pretty good I'm going to get a book, or 4. I can have a stack of books on the shelf waiting for me to pick up, but if a small bookshop is in my path, that stack's going to get higher. Sometime in 2022, I got sucked into Trident Bookstore in Boulder, Colorado, and was stopped in my tracks by the subtitle of a book on the shelf: "You Don't Have to Move Out of Your Neighborhood to Live in a Better One." The book, Reclaiming Your Community, never made it to my stack of books. I think I bought it in a large chai and read it before I got home. I've wanted to have a conversation with its author ever since. Majora Carter is a real estate developer, an urban revitalization strategist, a MacArthur Fellow, and a Peabody Award-winning broadcaster. But those titles only tell part of the story. She grew up in the South Bronx, in a neighborhood most people once described as beyond saving, and she spent her life proving them wrong. Her work challenges the idea that people should have to leave their communities to find opportunity. Instead, she's shown what happens when you build pathways for talent to stay home, to grow wealth, and to see their neighborhoods as places worth investing in. I'm excited to welcome Majora to the Sidewalk Ballet and hear about her journey, the intersections of race and economics, how capitalism can be used differently, and what it takes to really make a neighborhood thrive from within. Here's my conversation with Majora Carter. So I'm just going to dive in because I do have a lot I'm excited to talk to you about. And first, just thank you so much for being here and being on the Sidewalk Ballet. We're very excited to have you. I have been a fan of your work and really of you for some time. And so, I will just start by saying if I had one wish in the whole world, it would be that I could start every week with a Majora Carter TED Talk.
No.
It just the work you're doing is so inspiring, and the way you present it is just captivating and contagious. So thank you for that.
Well, it's not as contagious as I'd like for it to be, unfortunately. I still feel like quite a broken record talking about the way we talk about community development, in particular, this talent retention strategy. And I can absolutely feel and know, like, in my core and in my bones that this is what we need, in our communities. And it's like I'm just literally there's a big blood stain from me pounding my head up against the wall from the same people who keep doing the same exact things over and over again.
Right. Well, and that you are making an impact. I think hopefully you see
Absolutely.
that, and others who are doing similar work. I want to jump back to you're doing community development. You are a real estate developer. You are an activist, advocate, many things. You're a community builder, and you're also, as you've said, a poor Black girl from the ghetto, right? And
Mhm.
you have a charming origin story of a sense that you follow a dog to a very special place that becomes an important character in your story in a park by the river. I want to kind of dig into that origin story and maybe a broader origin story of how did you get from the poor Black girl in the ghetto to, like, where did your interest come from in
Mm.
this world of development?
Well, the path I really followed was the one that was very well worn, for kids like me growing up in a low status community like the South Bronx, which is a place where inequality is assumed, from people in the outside looking in, or definitely from people, in it, and they could be inner cities or Native American reservations, even poor white towns, where there once was industry but is no more. What's interesting is that path was literally out of my neighborhood. And, I was a smart kid, and I was told from literally the time I can remember anything, which was probably around 3, that you're going to grow up and be somebody. You're so smart, blah, blah, blah. that was my path. And, that kind of brain drain and this idea that you need to measure success by how far you get away from your community. These are the kind of things that I grew up with feeling that that's what I was gonna do in my life, and everything that I did was all about that. I mean, even from the time I was like, my first thoughts were, I'm gonna grow up and be somebody, which means I need to get out of this neighborhood that was literally at the time burning around me, because of all the financial disinvestment, historic, systemic bias that occurred, like through, the years of the financial discrimination, redlining, highway construction, all of it. Like we saw it right here and felt the impacts of it. So that was my path. Further on, when I realized that that was the path that I was on, because that's what happened in low status communities. It's the way they were perceived and they're thus developed in that way. And that I was just a part of that development. My path out was it. So ultimately, when I realized that that was a path that was almost predetermined because of the systemic nature of this country, that's when I was just like, no, I think I can like actually start building another way forward.
And for you, that other way forward was about staying placed, staying in your community and learning how to invest in your community. But you bring up an interesting kind of paradox that I want to explore about. I think the work that you're doing is in the world of anti-racism. And in that realm, there's a very strong critique of capitalism,
Yeah.
right? And even a rejection of capitalism. And yet you've flipped it. Like you've looked at how do we use these systems that have
Hmm.
created wealth and support for so many, but
Hmm.
have also been a tool of oppression and extraction and exploitation in Black and Brown communities. Like you're talking about, you found a different path, which is to stay in your community, but to use the tools that have been successful outside. Talk a little about that. Is that capitalist reform? Is it subversion or just utilization? Or how do you reconcile that? Or do you?
I think I'm going to start using it's just utilization. It's just these are the tools that are here. They are available, but we do need to start reframing, the idea of what capitalism can be used for and not actually use it the way that white supremacists really want us to view it as so that we don't think that it could be used for us. That's like a weird little beautiful Jedi mind trick that I'm sure everybody wants us to believe that somehow or another, the tools that created Black Wall Streets were the same ones that were used and defined slavery in this country. We know that. So, but wait, why can't we like look at it just objectively and go, hey, let's figure out how to make this happen. We know that opportunities for home ownership are really the single biggest opportunity for families to create wealth in this country and be able to pass it on generationally. We know that creating the kind of livable communities that allow dollars to circulate through it, which really means having the same type of economic developments, which includes third spaces, which supports, people, having eyes on the street and so that their communities feel livable and much more safe. That's just a perception, but it is also the reality in many cases, that those are the same things that we need in our communities. So why do we have an issue? Because you're right, I am considered sometimes a very controversial figure because I talk about money, and wanting more of it in our communities. Because I'm just like the last time I heard, there's no other way for us to really impact our communities. And whether or not we like it or not, we're all hoping for more of it. So let's just be realistic about like what we're doing and then try to maximize our ability, to be full participants, in a way that supports our communities.
So the tool isn't the problem, it's how it's employed.
Exactly. And we've seen, and we have every reason to believe that somehow it is the tool because how it's been wielded against us. I get that. But I also think that that's what the people who really have been using the tools want us to believe. So why would we do that?
Yeah, and it's a complex tool that takes a lot of education to understand how to use it. And that
Yeah,
education hasn't systematically been available for most,
most
right?
of
And
us.
especially in minority communities and low status communities. So bringing that education, how to utilize these tools that have created generational wealth and systemic wealth in communities is
It's powerful.
And the access, to the tools and the capital associated with it, because it's both of those things, right? Is you can't have one without the other. I mean, without the GI Bill, which we know was majority of it went to white GIs, and which helped them. Create opportunities for their families, that there were loans so they could buy houses. Actually, even the whole idea of loans and mortgages to buy a home disproportionately went to white families. And it was just like, that's great. We're going to make sure that happens.
By
And we
design.
all,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. So it's just like it could have gone another way. So how about we focus on making sure it goes the other way?
Let's talk about talent retention, because I think that's kind of been a foundation for a lot of your work and the thesis of keeping people in communities, and how obvious that is if you look at the corporate world. You want good people, you invest in them. So how do we invest in good people in our communities that we want to build and grow? Talk about that a little bit, and specifically, I'd love to hear where you think the most powerful tools in that are. Like, what are the actual levers that do keep people in their communities?
So, it's interesting because I've been thinking about what are the things that make communities sticky, right? They kind of really do need to feel, safe and livable, right? And if there's just the perception that there's less safety or less livability, then it automatically makes people feel like time to bolt. Like I'll give a, sort of a horrible example. I mean, the way that current, planning and development practices happen in the lower status neighborhoods here, in New York City, and I'm sure it's all over the country. It's not just here. But where do you put the drug addiction sites, and the kind of, those type of places? They'll be in places where, frankly, wealthier and usually whiter communities can afford to avoid. So we see them here. And so even though we know that crime in general has dropped precipitously since the 1970s, since literally some of the worst times of, crime in American history, seeing, a drug addict, just in broad daylight, even though we know good and daggone well that there's harmless to everyone, except unfortunately themselves, right? It becomes this sensation. It's just like, this, first of all, is not what you want to see. Also, everything just feels, say, unsafe and unlivable. Like, this is not where you want to be.
Right. If the idea, if nobody's taking care of that, if something important needs taken care of, there's no one caring for the space. Therefore, it doesn't feel safe. Even if that
Precisely.
isn't necessarily safe, just seeing somebody with their trash all over the place doing drugs makes it feel like there's no order. And therefore, if there's no order, I don't feel safe.
Exactly. So even though the data shows that actually you're safer now than you actually ever have been, does not matter. So what we need more of are, one, places that actually don't disproportionately cite these kind of places here, because honestly, most of the time, these are not the same people from our neighborhood. And we know this because most of them are white. So we know they're not from this neighborhood. But again, this is where you can find everything you need. But then also, the other thing is literally the kind of places that make people build community. Those third spaces, whether they're cafes or bars or restaurants, they are not mostly in communities like this. And by building those places, and we know that through history, having those spaces, whether it's the civil rights history, where there were churches, there were the blacks only places, where there were either hotels or restaurants where people would gather to build what became the civil rights movement, right? And so, but it's also just the kind of places where people go to build community so that they feel like their neighborhood is worth living in, straight up. And if we're not investing in those kind of places, if we don't consider them a priority, like the ones that we've built in my own neighborhood, I did them. I literally built the first cafe we've had in this neighborhood since the 1980s, which is bizarre to me. Another event hall is what we're building. I'm just astonished. Well, I'm not that astonished, unfortunately, that there really isn't a real priority in seeing these third spaces as things that actually do help make communities more livable and certainly feel more safe. It is the quintessential, eyes on the street that Jane Jacobs talks about all the time. like having these places so that people are moving in between them and then congregating, for good and for building their own communities.
So tell me about the Boogie Down Cafe, because you built the Boogie Down Cafe in your neighborhood, and it is a third space. I have a lot of questions about that, but I want to start with, did you understand how important that was before you built it, or was it discovery after you built it about the value of third space, a value of that as a neutral community
Mm.
building space?
And we knew the value of third spaces. Absolutely. Like even before like all the data that we know now, has come out about it. We knew that. It was just clear to us. We really should have written reports about it. We just didn't have the capacity to do it. So, but the really interesting thing there was that what I didn't understand, we only did it mostly because we found, after we did an enormous amount of market research and realized that people were literally leaving the neighborhood, even if it was not, we're not talking moving out, but just like they would take themselves and their money to go to places like that and build community in other places. And often people would end up leaving the neighborhood and if they could. And so we realized that if we really wanted to create the right kind of infrastructure for people to feel as though they had every reason to stay and invest, not just monetarily, but emotionally in our own community so that they wouldn't believe the hype about how awful we were. And by association, they were themselves. We had to build these things here and make them the quality in which nobody else did. And so initially, I wasn't trying to get into the cafe business. That is just not my jam. What I was hoping to do, what we did, was actually develop relationships with local building owners and get very cheap rent for those storefronts. And we just went around asking, trying to find someone who's had a dream to open up a cafe, and those that had the dream, didn't have the capacity, and those that had the capacity didn't want to. Like Starbucks, literally was just like, no, that place is, we don't want to be in that place.
We've
And
done the market research. No, thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, of course, I met them a couple years later, and then after we had already done it, they were like, "Oh, you know what? Maybe this could be good." And I'm just like, "I hate you even more now. Thank you very much."
Yeah.
But that's
Well, I mean, that's the cycle, right? Well,
yep, that's what they do.
you all make it worth something, and then we'll come in
Mhm.
and take it out.
Precisely. And then the pandemic happened, so nobody came anywhere, but that's beside the point. But actually that helped us a lot, mostly because it was like we were the only game in town. So all that to say is that when we opened it up, we knew what we were doing. And we also knew the struggles associated with being the first, group in like that. Yeah, it's been quite a road, I have to say, but worth all of the time and the brain damage, and the money, to get it to the point that it is right now.
So if somebody's interested in doing similar work like that, specifically like that in their community, you're not in you don't want to be in the cafe business. You're not in the event space business. You're not booking
Mm-mm.
bar mitzvahs or whatever.
We are actually, but
but
I
you
don't want to
are.
keep doing it. Yeah.
Right. So I'm guessing your role is a little bit kind of, you alluded to this, you're a matchmaker. Like you're talking to the property owners, you're talking to investment, you're talking to entrepreneurs, you're talking about community youth who need a job, you're talking to all the pieces and putting it together and saying, here's how we build a community, here are the pieces, here's what your role is.
Right. We're catalysts, and we, see these things, and it's sort of a strange position to be in, because sometimes I do feel like, Cassandra, telling everybody is like, "Look, they're coming," and people are like, "You don't see, what are you talking about?" And it's frustrating, but life goes on.
But it's where, so one of the things I love the term I've heard you or saw you've used, lifestyle infrastructure, right? And talking about that, like in terms of talent retention, people are leaving to go live where there's the cool hip cafe. So for you as a developer, let's make the cool hip cafe here so people will come here, be here, stay here.
Yeah, stay here mostly. But yes, we do want people to come as well because the reality is, we don't have like our community, people may love us or whatever, but we really don't have the, enough capital, within our communities. We need the influx of somebody else's cash, as well, dropping it in here, and then they could go home and whatever. But it's great for us, and I feel like that's what's going to help us, create more opportunities for lifestyle infrastructure. Not me. I'm out of that business.
How would you make a distinction between? You also talk about in your book about sort of the existing infrastructure that is in the plem. You use that kind of the poverty.
Poverty level economic maintenance, although we just keep it to, poverty maintenance at this point.
So you talk about community centers in that as one of those things. And, I have a picture in my head of what a community center in that world looks like, very like grant funded or government subsidized or whatever. Make the distinction of like why a Boogie Down Cafe provides that lifestyle infrastructure, whereas a something more in line with a community center.
Yeah. So I actually definitely, took a couple hits, and which will take and embrace, when I would talk about community centers, because there were some folks who like love their community centers because they were actually much more, in line with what I thought of, a community center which is really about building community should be.
It's about a center of the community.
Yeah,
Right.
as opposed to like this like dark, dank, often windowless facility that developers would build so they can build a couple extra apartments, in an affordable complex so they can say, look what I did for the community. I built them a room in a windowless basement.
But no thought to programming or
None
accessibility.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I see you 100%, and you I can't stand. But I realized that I probably should have qualified it a bit more. And if I ever do another part of the book, I will. But in the meantime, what a community center actually is it's a center of the community. And for whatever, and there can be many of them, and there should be many of them. Like in higher status communities, it's not like there's one place you go to. Who does that? Who says that? There's like, you've got a bunch of different cafes. When this one's your favorite, your friend might have a favorite some other place. There could be a great park that you love, that in this particular area, and it is where you and your people gather. But again, in low status communities, it's often this like predetermined, usually that's been sort of like blessed by the nonprofit industrial complex with the type of programming that honestly does not appeal to many of the people in the community. Straight up. It's just like, most of the kids that I know are not trying to do arts and crafts. They're trying to figure out like, I don't know what they're trying to do, but I feel like they're looking for other places when you could look at that and see like the low numbers, in many of these places. So I think it's a really interesting, idea to really push on like you build places that make a whole number of people feel and see value in their own community, whether or not they're partaking in that particular aspect, but they know that it's there and they know it's valuable to somebody, maybe not to me, but it could be valuable to somebody else. We lack many of those in our communities.
So talking about like the lifestyle infrastructure as a tool for talent retention, why else are people leaving? I imagine that's a big, big part of it. But what else is, I'm sure there's opportunity. What other levers do you have?
I mean, the lifestyle infrastructure, it's very broad, but the real meat of it is that it gives people an opportunity to actually know that they're not alone. Because like one of the things that we noticed or just became to light very quickly once we built the cafe was that there were 3 Harvard graduates in this community, living in this community at the same time. They never
They didn't
knew
know.
it.
They didn't know each other.
Nope. I mean, because they didn't know each other while on campus, but then the cafe was something that made them go, "Oh, wait a second." And it was the kind of thing that nobody would expect to see in our neighborhoods. And so just even being able to tell that story to other folks, and they were just like, "Wait, we have people from Harvard here? Wait, we have people who are interested in veterinary science? I'm interested in veterinary science."
I can do that. You're
Yes.
from here and you did that?
100%. And so that's what lifestyle infrastructure does. Like it literally broadens people's idea of what our communities can and can be and are and actually is. And that is, I know it's a super dangerous tool, to deploy for some folks who are kind of okay with the idea that these, low status communities are problems that are never really ever going to be solved. And I see and know enough value in our community. Most of it has to do with the people that are here, whether or not they're Harvard, or what. I don't really care what they do, but we have so much to look forward to, but we're led to believe that we don't. And unfortunately, many of us believe that after a while.
So I want to ask a kind of another tool question about this, because you talked about home ownership and kind of having equity, like generational equity in your community, is the single most important way to generate wealth in a community. There's also, you talk a lot about predatory speculation and the vulnerability of low status communities to that. Looking at, just as one of many examples, Lahaina just suffered a traumatic fire. The predatory vultures were there overnight, and a group formed a land trust there, a community land trust. And maybe that's just a specific tool for a specific occasion. But I think looking at the instrument of a land trust to maintain equity in a community, which is a little different than individual generational family wealth. But I'm curious your thoughts on community land trusts as a mechanism for developing communities, particularly low status communities.
Yeah, no, when I feel like the word land trust is often bandied around in ways that I don't think are helpful, because a a land trust, as I first understood it, because I was first became familiar with them, the ones up in Vermont, with the Vermont Land Trust. And basically, the trust owns the land, the individual homes, the actual everything on top of it is owned by the family. And that's what accrues equity. Now, is it as much as owning the actual land as well? No. But is it something? Yes. And so that's what I thought land trusts were. And I was like, you know what? That is a brilliant idea. That is a really good idea. I often find that land trusts are often, frankly, just another way to preserve, to make sure you get either cheap or free rent for a community center in some space. And they're not designed to create any equity for anybody, even the organization that's managing it, because they still have to raise funds from the Philanthropic Center for programming. And I'm like, that's not a land trust. Call it's a nonprofit, and and it may be doing great stuff, but it does not build equity. And stop saying that it does, because that I find is just disingenuous. And again, not building any equity for anybody. And again, listen, I understand that there are people way smarter than I am who've tried to dismantle capitalism, but it is what we
It's a lot
have
of
right
work.
now. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's a lot of work when you just got to get food on the table.
Sure enough. But yes, I think that, if it's a way to protect what already belongs to people, yeah, you put that thing together. And I know that there's it's a legal structure that can be such a valuable tool to keep the predators at bay. And that's when it's smart.
Yeah. What other ways, I'm sure education is a big part of it, but how do you protect communities from predatory speculation?
Oh, education is the biggest thing. One of the things we're trying to get philanthropy to consider is actually, basically playing a role of a type of predatory speculator, especially in rapidly gentrifying communities. Because if they go and buy the properties that, predatory speculators literally go to, vulnerable people, the elderly, et cetera. That's why it's so easy to steal these deeds and just say, I can take this off your hands, whatever, and generally buy for less than what they're worth. What if there were philanthropy that literally put together, lots of philanthropy put together a fund, went into those same neighborhoods and, said, we'll buy this house from you. Maybe they can still live in it, age in place, whatever. But set up a structure so that when the time is right for another family who wants to purchase that house, they can. Right? Because right now, I can say in my own neighborhood, most of the homes sell to predatory speculators because they can get money, to the owner super, super fast. A regular mortgage, takes months. and months and months. And, for someone who like doesn't know the value of their own property, which is many folks, or, if it's just been duped in whatever way,
Or is
they,
desperate
and it's
or
desperate,
feels
they're going to do
desperate.
it.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to do. And again, these are tools. That is still capitalism. I find that a lot more compassionate than, just going, oh, you know what, we're going to take care of people after they lose their house. Like, how about why, you could have helped them keep their home. You really could have, but nobody wants to talk about that. And that's why I don't have many friends in the philanthropic world.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to understand about how you sell that to philanthropy. Like people are philanthropic for a number of reasons, but not that big a number, right?
But think about it. It's a good investment. They have property to back it up. It's not like they're not losing anything. They're holding it.
It is less philanthropy and more investment.
Yeah, but they're not used to doing that in low status communities.
Yeah.
And that is a problem that no one
Not
wants to
unless
say out
they see
loud.
a low status community that's about to become high status because some outside force is coming in and
Yeah.
displacing the low
Mhm.
statusness. So how do people who don't live in the South Bronx, people who don't live in low status communities, because I think a lot of people, myself included, read your book and like inspired, how can I help? Like, what is the role of people who aren't in that world without overstepping, with that, like being able to support? Like, what are things that we can do within this structure to support communities closer to us and people in building equity?
Right. There are people doing work like I'm doing all over the country, like, and you're in the Bay Area. EB Prec, East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative is doing it and has done a tremendous job using crowdfunding, campaign where they're literally, selling shares, in a development that they're doing. The first, the community is the biggest part of it. But ultimately, they're sharing that kind of equity. They still need more investment. Invest in stuff like that. Invest in like the burgeoning entrepreneurs and developers who are trying to develop in their own community. Like, I can speak from experience. It's just like I can, been doing some really tremendous projects here, and I'm still waiting. I don't have a guarantor for one of the loans that I need. Just like this could be a great possibility, for someone who's really interested in seeing these communities being redeveloped in ways that are consistent, with the kind of community development that's actually retaining the talent that's in that neighborhood. And so those are the things that I think could be really helpful. Um, and just one asking, themselves is what I'm doing now the exact same thing that's already been done? Because there's just like people love, the donating, to soup kitchens, the donating to, which is important. They're totally important, like the scholarship funds, to get kids out. But are we actually just asking ourselves, why do we fully expect that people need to grow up and measure success by how far they get away from their community? What dynamic have we set up and played a role in so that that continues to happen? And is there something else we can do so that communities can actually reclaim themselves economically, socially, environmentally, and all that?
What are you most excited about that you're doing right now? Like where
Oh,
is this? I know you're
um,
always doing a million things. So what's energizing you?
I am most excited by the project that we've been working on, or ideating on for a few years at this point, which is a transit-oriented development. The first phase of which is we're claiming this former rail station and transforming that into an event hall, and it's called Bronxlandia. But it's really just the first phase of a project that will include, hundreds of units of housing, including home ownership, as well as the kind of job creating, commercial and light industrial spaces. We're talking about 100,000 square feet, for that, and also a hotel that will have, a couple hundred units, of both live and also just hotel space, so that we can capitalize on the fact that in a few years, this neighborhood is going to be 15 minutes away from our Penn Station, which is like our major transit hub in the city, making it an ideal transit-oriented development. So we will be able to attract dollars, from visitors who come to stay in New York City, or visit cool places in the Bronx. They leave their money and and then they go, which is really what we want to see that happening. But then we also get all these cool third spaces, from the cafes and the bars and the banquet halls and the cute little tchotchke shops. I mean, all that kind of stuff we're very excited about.
So this space has some significance to you personally.
Yeah, it really does. And it's literally the reason I was born. So my dad was born in 1907, and he was a Pullman porter, like in his late 30s, and it was probably in the very late 30s when his main line was the one that ran right underneath this rail station, which was designed by Cass Gilbert. It was like a super famous American architect. And he would look up at it and know that neighborhood was actually, had like a bunch of homes that were just there. And he was just like, I would like to, because this is my main line, I'd get tired of going all the way down to Penn Station. And wouldn't it be, he was living in Harlem at the time, and it would be so wonderful if I could have a house here. And again, this was the 1930s, historically a horrible time to be Black in America, especially financially. And he had actually won $15,000 in a horse race. And he was out in California at the time, carried the money in a satchel, like literally wouldn't put it in a bank, carried it in cash home, and then took the subway up to Hunts Point and literally walked the streets. My dad was like 6'3", like beautiful Hershey. I call him the Hershey Special Dark Chocolate Bar, color. And he found someone who was willing, of an Italian family named the Sacco family, who were willing to sell directly to him. So it was a direct sale, which was great. And yeah, that's how I was born. He married my mom. I was the last of the kids they had together. And so yeah, every time I look out there, I'm just like, thanks, Pop.
So this project's very much a full circle moment for you.
Yeah, totally. Like his baby daughter's doing this work. And,
that's amazing.
It's kind of funny. It does crack me up.
It's also really
does.
special. It's really meaningful and powerful. And congratulations. I mean,
Thank you.
That's such a great feat. And I hope to get out there and stay there someday.
Well, I hope you will too.
So let me ask you one last thing. And again, thank you so much for your time. We could talk forever. You talk about, the subtitle of your book, You Don't Have to Leave Your Community to Live in a Better One. So Hunts Point, since you've been doing this work, is it a better community?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen, especially since my growing up here, crime rates have gone down. Like it does seem like some of the quality of life issues, do get worse, but ultimately things absolutely are better. I absolutely can hear and get the benefit of seeing people like feel that the community is something that they feel as though they don't have to move out of in order to live in a better one. And some of it is, being the first kid on the block to try to build these places that make people like give the neighborhood a second look and think about like why they felt the way they did about it in the first place and want to give it a second chance. And so for that, I am deeply, deeply grateful and feel extraordinarily blessed that I've had the opportunity to do the work I do.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the work you do. I really appreciate you talking to us here on the Sidewalk Ballet, and look forward to seeing everything that's next for you. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Majora Carter is a real estate developer, urban revitalization strategy consultant, MacArthur Fellow, Peabody Award-winning broadcaster, and teaches at Princeton University. She doesn't just talk about community, she builds it, invests in it, and demands that it invests in itself. The subtitle of her book, Reclaiming Community, Nobody Should Have to Move Out of Their Neighborhood to Live in a Better One, is quoted on the walls of the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture in D.C. I highly recommend getting yourself and anyone else you know who's interested in strengthening communities a copy of her book. You can do that and find out more about the many projects Majora and her team are working on at majoracartergroup.com. Thank you so much to Tanish Hollins and Gwen Brown from SF Black Wall Street for sharing part of their story with Abra. To find out more about their efforts in the Bay Area, visit sfbwsfoundation.org. You can find that URL and hear Abra's full conversation with Tanish and Gwen, as well as links to all of the organizations mentioned in this episode at sidewalkballet.com. The work of city building is largely about development. We understand the urgency of economic development, district development, real estate development, especially as our city centers rebuild and recalibrate in a constant state of renewal and reinvention. We focus on what we can build and what we can improve. The stories we heard today from these inspiring leaders remind us that it is not what we build, but who we build that makes cities great. No development project has greater impact on a community than the development of people. A thriving neighborhood isn't just about jobs or building, it's about people choosing to stay, having the ability to, and having good reason to. Sidewalk Ballet is presented by Big Creative Consulting, strengthening community through culture and place. Learn more at bigcreativeconsulting.com. Also by This Must Be the Place, a bi-monthly newsletter connecting placemaking professionals to opportunities. Learn more at thismustbe.org. Contributors include Abra Allen and myself, engineering and editing by Ryan Musante. Our theme music was composed by the Peacoat Project. Additional music for this episode performed by the Twilight Brass Band and Alexander Music. If this conversation resonated, please share it with someone who's doing the work of keeping their community whole. And join the conversation on our Discord server, also linked at sidewalkballet.com. I'm Chip. Thank you so much for joining us on this block of the Sidewalk Ballet. I'll see you downtown.